everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today we have an exciting show. If you've ever gone on the internet and looked up a Chinese food recipe, there's a good chance that your search engine pointed you to our guests today. They are two of the founders and creators behind The Walks of Life. And we are excited to have them with us today. We are talking to Sarah and Kaitlin Leung from The Walks of Life. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Curtis.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for spending time with us. Where are you guys calling from?
We are calling from my parents' house in the suburbs of New Jersey. And yeah, we're here blogging some recipes this week.
Awesome. What's good in the suburbs of New Jersey right now?
What isn't good in the suburbs of New Jersey?
Yeah.
Of course.
Bagels.
Uh-huh.
Bagels and pizza are really good. And it's springtime right now, so we're getting ready to do some gardening and hopefully beef up the new gardening section of our blog.
Ooh, how are the weeds looking?
Actually, not bad. I've been staying on top of those. I think I read this book about organic gardening last year that was like, hey, don't neglect your garden in winter and like check to make sure that those weeds aren't getting too out of control. So I've been out there periodically weeding over the last month or so.
I literally laughed out loud. I think it was one of Sarah's posts where we showed this immaculate, the paver stones, how immaculately clean they were. And then you said, literally one day later. That was a good one.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
It's
weeds
never
are
ending.
insidious. Yes.
Never ending. Yeah. Okay. So we are talking to Sarah and Kaitlin Leung. Could you give us a quick elevator pitch of The Walks of Life?
Sure. So The Walks of Life is a multi-generational food blog that Kaitlin and I run with our parents, Bill and Judy. And we started it in 2013, basically as a way to record our family recipes, because Kaitlin and I realized that while we loved to cook, we really didn't know how to make a lot of the dishes that our parents cooked for us growing up. Many of them were Chinese recipes. So while we were cooking like spaghetti and meatballs and like other recipes that you could easily find on the internet or in a book, we really didn't have access to those Chinese recipes that we grew up with. So we started the blog to record those, and realized that there were a lot of other people, not just us, looking for those recipes out there. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure you hear this all the time where it's like someone will share, oh, my grandma used to make this, but she never wrote anything down,
Right.
Or, I've seen my uncle do this. I've seen my dad do that, but no one writes these things down. It's like they just wing it. And so it's so nice to have this resource of generations, right? Your grandparents are involved as well a little bit with their recipes, but it's just great to see this treasure trove literally of Chinese cooking on the internet. And so thank you so much for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think also everybody shares, everybody, I should say, like a lot of Chinese Americans share that sort of vague understanding or awareness or familiarity of these things. And there comes a time where rubber meets the road and you're like, okay, like how do I actually roll up my sleeves and start to do this myself and pull it off? And I think we really find it rewarding that, the blog is a resource for people where it's like one more step in the right direction or like a little bit easier to kind of get started. So
yeah,
that's been great.
Yeah. Do you mind if we dig a little into your past? I like to go into the roots of our guests here.
Sure.
So Chinese Americans, you have kind of a dual past in a way. Your dad, the name Leung sounds like a Cantonese name to me. Did your dad have more of a Cantonese background?
Yep. Our dad's family is Cantonese and our mom is from Shanghai.
Mm-hmm. How far back do you know your roots on your dad's side? Is he American born himself?
Yeah, so my dad grew up in upstate New York in the Catskills, actually. So he is a first generation Chinese American born in the U.S. And his parents were immigrants. They came from Guangdong in that sort of Shenzhen area, very close to Hong Kong. And yeah, his parents immigrated here. His father was a chef. His grandfather was a chef, and his stepfather was also a chef. So they all found work as chefs here in the U.S., which is, I think, where a lot of that sort of love of food and cooking started. And also my grandmother on my dad's side was also a really accomplished home cook. So my dad and his sisters, my two aunts, definitely got a really sort of deep kitchen education from a young age. My dad and my two aunts, they're all great cooks, and they all really, as a family, we all really care about food. And then on my mom's side, she actually grew up in Shanghai. She came to the US at 16, and she ended up a stone's throw away from my dad in Monticello, New York.
Okay.
And that's where they met. So they met pretty young. My mom, I think, was 19, and my dad was 22 at the time. And yeah, the rest is history.
So was he that restaurant kid who was doing homework in between stir frying and stuff like that?
Not exactly. So my grandparents actually didn't own the restaurant until my dad was in college.
Okay. But he wasn't that wasn't his full-time job, right? He was an engineer, or
Yes. Yeah.
So he was just kind of helping out where he could.
Yep, he was a software engineer, and he had his first job in Binghamton, New York, which is about 3 hours north of where the restaurant was. And every Friday night, he would drive the 3 hours down from Binghamton down to New Jersey to work the weekend at the restaurant.
Oh, wow. Did you guys get dragged along at all, or was he out of the business by that point?
So the restaurant closed shortly after, I think, Kaitlin was born. So my grandparents kind of retired. But there are pictures of us as me as like a toddler. And
very few.
They're
as an rare,
infant.
but there's a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think if you talk to almost any Chinese American who's been here for a little while, someone in the family had a restaurant. It was just what you did, right? Because language skills, or even just trying to get ahead in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s and 60s.
Yeah,
there weren't
totally.
a ton of opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, and I think a good sign of a good Chinese restaurant is like a 9-year-old doing homework in the front.
Absolutely.
So true.
No, for sure.
Yeah, because it's family owned, and
Yeah, I mean, back then, I think it was just the profession of choice for, like, as you said, a lot of reasons, right? There's a language barrier. I think it was sort of a more surefire business. I think there was always going to be like an immigrant community who was around to kind of enjoy the food. And as well as, I think Chinese food these days is beginning to get credit for just like how deeply etched it is in American food culture as this mainstay. Like in any town in America, like chances are there's like a little Chinese takeout joint at least. So yeah, I mean, like Sarah said, like our dad had experience in it, our grandfather, my dad's biological father, my dad's stepfather, and then his grandfather. Like it just was a very much a common thing.
It's in your blood.
Yeah.
But then you went to college, right? And you said to yourself, you know what? I think I'm going to, well, I don't know what you said to yourself, but so you go to college and you're studying kind of different forms of media and communication. Was food at all in your future at that point, if you were to talk to yourself?
That's a great question. Frankly, definitely not. I think that we grew up loving food, eating food, cooking food. I think that we started our education pretty young, of like kind of getting our feet wet in the kitchen, but it was never seen as a career. And I think that's like very much part of like the Chinese immigrant story is like, maybe the parents and the grandparents worked the restaurant or worked as chefs, but that was so that the kids could do something else. Right.
So you
So
didn't have to,
there's
yeah.
always that like, through line of like, oh, get out of the kitchen, go study, like do your homework, do something, learn,
Right.
go be a doctor or dentist or a lawyer or whatever, right? So me and Sarah, nothing was ever forced on us, I'll say that. Like if we had woken up and been like, I want to go to culinary school, I think my parents would have been supportive, but we definitely were interested in, I think just doing the like that like narrative that you get as a kid, or it's like go out and get a job in corporate America, and I think we kind of both looked at college in that way. Yeah, I don't know, Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I would say that I didn't necessarily consider food as a career until I actually had been working for a year. I was out of college for 1 year. I had been working actually in China at a brand consulting agency. And then I lost my visa for various like kind of political reasons. And then I was like, oh, I can't like continue my job here because of my visa. And so I came back to the US and tried to find a job, and it was really a struggle. And the first time I actually considered like, oh, like I could do something in food was when I started the blog. And I was like, I can't find a job. Like I need to do something with my time. As a family, we were kind of just like, hey, let's start this food blog. And Sarah, like you have a lot of time. You do like you start it. And then I kind of thought like, I always considered it more of a plan B as like a side project that we would work on. But in the back of my head, like, it's nice to have a plan B, right? Because if your plan A is kind of wonky or not going the way that you want it to, there's always this like backup. So in my head, I was always like, oh, if this like whole marketing thing doesn't work out, I could always end up like doing the blog full time. And to go back to what Kaitlin was saying about how, our elders or parents or grandparents wouldn't necessarily have wanted like the same experience for us of like working in food. I think that, none of us could have envisioned what like a food career might look like today, right? With like food blogs and, content creation and videos and like all this stuff. So, it's different and different than I imagined, and also a lot better than I imagined. So really happy about that.
Yeah, and I've heard you say, I think that it was kind of born out of the desire for this food yourself, because your parents had moved overseas and were like, see you later, and you were home, and we're like, wait, we've never actually written down these recipes. We don't, the food that we grew up with, we don't have access to it. And so that kind of spurred the idea, like, well, if I'm going to do a food blog, may as well do the food that I want to cook. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, when I was looking at colleges, I was like, I want to be close to home, So like I found a school in Philly and ended up there. And then like basically before I even like got to college, my parents were like, oh, we're moving to China. And I was like, what the heck? I deliberately wanted to be close to home, and now you're going to China, literally like the furthest away you could go. But I like that aside, I think being in college is it's kind of one of those, like I said, rubber meets the road moments where you're like, okay, I do not know what I'm doing. I don't know how to get from point A to point B on these dishes that I really love to eat growing up. And I think there was that part of it. And then there was also like this aspect of it where we were always pretty close growing up. Like, I think that for us, like family time was always this like unwritten rule. Like everybody made an effort to be at the dinner table every night growing up. And then when my parents moved to China, suddenly that was like gone. And it was weird, like as a family who spent a lot of time together and also would like talk about like really like banal things of like, what should we have for dinner? It's like, we're one of those families where as soon as lunch wraps up, we're like, what's for dinner? So like to not have that was very strange. And so like the blog was a really nice way to, wrap our hands around those recipes and cooking techniques and all that good stuff. And it was also a way to keep in touch with each other and kind of like stay close and, you know, jot down little thoughts and things. Like in the early days of the blog, it was much more like bloggy, where it was just sort of like musings. And then the other part of the blog was the fact that my parents were in China, and then Sarah, you know, not long after joined them there. And there was all this huge sort of influx of knowledge and tastes and different dishes and discoveries. And it was like, what do we do with all that? And sort of be ashamed to not kind of like channel it into something that would be, you know, a resource for us, at least, you know, going forward. Like if nothing else, it was our family's recipe archives. Like that's what it was designed to be from the get-go. And it was like, all right, if only like 2 or 3 people like wander on here, it's not that bad.
Right. It's at least like a journal for yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and now that you look back on it, I mean, I'm sure you've done this, right? If you think about, if I wanted to create a Chinese food blog from scratch, wouldn't you want someone who's worked in the industry, right? And you want maybe someone who was born overseas, and you need someone with some organizational skills and someone with some social media skills. And it looks like the 4 of you, you know, in a way.
Yeah, it's true.
It just
we've got very lucky.
We got really lucky.
All the skill sets that we have, because it's actually incredibly complementary. Like, you know, my mom has more of that like design, creative sensibility. My dad is very like technical and like discerning on techniques and ingredients and sort of the back end of the blog. And Sarah kind of does both, honestly. Sarah has the will to move everything forward and the detail orientation. And then I don't know, I have good.
She's the social chair.
I'm the social chair of the Walks of Life, which is hilarious because in a family of 4 introverts, I'm the most extroverted and I'm the social chair. Like that, if you knew me personally, like that's pretty astounding. But yeah, you know, me and Sarah both have a background in, you know, branding and sort of online marketing.
Right.
So it's actually, it was a perfect storm, and it has been a perfect storm over the last like literally decade, because we started back in 2013, which is crazy to think about, but it's a train that's been running for a while.
Yeah. And you know, I'm sure in 2013 you were just, like you said, kind of doing it for yourselves or the 2 or 3 people that would wander on there. Because like, how many of us knew someone in 2013? How many of us knew someone who made money off of a blog, who made a living off of a blog? You know, like a lot of people had blogs. There's
totally.
a million of them.
There was a growing food blog world, I would say. It was definitely there. And there were people who made money off of it, but the people who made money off of it were more of like, whoa, like that's such like a kind of like shot in the dark sort of a thing, like once in a idioms once in a blue moon. I don't know what the right idiom is, but you know, it was more rare. It wasn't like today where like everything goes viral all the time, and like at any given moment like something is going off the like crazy popular. And yeah, so back then it was like, you know, maybe we could try our hand at it and, you know, see if we could succeed. But at the very least, what we noticed was that there really was no singular go-to super robust resource for the kind of Chinese cooking content that we were looking for. You know, more approachable, in Chinese, detailed for a couple of rubes.
In English.
Yeah, I'm sorry. In English, I misspoke. In English, and detailed enough for a couple of like millennial rubes like ourselves to sort of get started.
And so when did you know that you had a hit on your hands? Like, was it like a slow burn? You know, like, oh, look, we have 100, 1,000, you know, like, when did you know?
It was a really slow burn for us, I would say. It took like a few good years before we started noticing that we were racking up audience. It was a slow start. I think in the first year it was like, we were like, oh, it's just us. It's just us looking at this thing, and like maybe some family members and maybe a few people who just wandered in. How did they find us? How did they even like discover us? It's so like, we were just like dumbfounded that anyone would stumble across our blog. Year 2 was probably, we started to get a little bit of momentum. We were trying to like, I guess, for lack of promote our recipes elsewhere so that people would find them. So we started to be like, oh, hey, like maybe if we post our recipe or like our recipe on this platform, like there used to be these, I don't know if people remember this site, but it was called Food Gawker. Yeah. So where like you would just go on there and kind of just scroll through these images of like pretty food images and like kind of think like, oh, what like, are there any recipes here that I want to try? And so we would like, we would post our stuff to Food Gawker, and, just slowly started to notice a few more people coming onto the site. And I think probably the year was 2015 or 2016 when we really were like, oh, hey, there's like a significant number of people looking at our site. And then over the last few years, we've definitely noticed a lot more growth and more interest in Chinese cooking in general. I think that it probably started more with, Chinese Americans like ourselves who are looking for these recipes. But I think over the past few years, we've noticed just a greater overall interest in Chinese cooking and in wok cooking, by the general public, which I think is really great. And people are realizing that these dishes that used to be sort of only for the realm of eating out are now things that they can make themselves at home, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah. No, I think that's key. Well, let's talk about your blog for a second. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Was the aesthetic always something super important to you? Like,
not at all.
Oh.
No.
Truly not at all.
Truly not. Yeah, no. I don't know if you can do this on like time machine. Like there were those like internet time machine things where you can like go back to a web page and what it looked like 3 years ago or something. Our site formerly for many, many years was very like janky.
It wasn't janky. It was very bare bones.
Bare bones, not at all designed, not particularly.
It was our logo at the top, and then like a little bit of navigation below that, and then just like recipes. And you would just scroll down, recipe. You would go page by page.
It was very traditional,
super basic blog. And for a long time, we were we were like, we're utilitarian, and that's all people need. And it was kind of.
I think the biggest thing was that we saw other sites that were just really beautiful and really functional, and we wanted to do that, but because Kaitlin and I were both working full-time jobs, we just didn't have the time to spearhead a project to completely redesign the blog. And so I actually ended up quitting my job in 2019 and working on the blog full time. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, it's time for us to redesign this thing. And I think we launched it in early 2020. So it's actually kind of recent that the blog is looking so kind of sleek and nice. A relatively recent development.
And that might have timed out too, as everyone was at home and locked in their houses, craving Chinese takeout. Maybe that was a good timing too for that. Yeah, I was going to say, I was expecting you to say, oh yes, I've always cared about the aesthetic. It's always been important to me because it looks so good now. And, like for me, whenever I buy a cookbook, I only cook the recipes that have pictures, I don't think I'm alone either, but I think that when you go to your website and you see the pictures and you see the start to finish pictures, it just makes you feel like you can do it a lot more easy than just reading words on a page. So
I will say that from the beginning we did care about the photos. We cared about we did care about clear photos and the step-by-step photos because we wanted to feel achievable, and we also wanted the food to look good, right?
Right.
And so when it came to like the food styling, which is like my mom's realm. And like the propping and like the photography, we definitely did put effort into there. But the actual site design didn't always match the quality of the photos.
Well, I think there's something to be said, right? And like when you think about like food media, I think at the time that we were growing up, mostly the food that was getting like beautifully presented and savored visually was really not Chinese food, or like not even like many ethnic foods beyond like Italian, I guess. And there were pockets and there were trailblazers, the Martin Yans and the Grace Youngs and the Yan Can Cooks. Martin Yan, I already said. The Ming Tsai, thank you.
Yeah.
But, it wasn't that widespread. So I think for us to that's why the photos were so important, because, that's the thing about food blogging, content creation is like it does, the beauty does get you halfway there sometimes. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes. So, yeah, I think it was really nice for us to kind of say, hey, like, let's get in the driver's seat and feature this food in the way that it deserves to be featured and spotlit and appreciated and, kind of marveled and drooled over. So, yeah, that was definitely like super important from day one. And I mean, it was they were growing pains. Some of our old pictures. Actually, there's not so many old pictures surviving anymore, but some of our old pictures are pretty rough.
Yeah. Now, I don't have current numbers, and you can fill them in if you can. But I saw 7 million unique views a month. Is that still current, or are you above that now?
Yeah, 7 million page views a month is about right. I think that was a number that we kind of, we did exceed that number during the pandemic. Things have kind of settled back down now, I think, as people are eating out again. But it's really amazing to see that level of traffic. I mean, I used to get excited when in one day we would get 100 views.
Right.
So to be at that level now, where we're at like a few 100,000 views per day, is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the 5 boroughs of New York are like 8 million. So it's almost like the entire city of New York is coming, to your living room every day. That's amazing. Like, those numbers are mind-boggling in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That makes me feel really like excited.
You can use that if you like. So here we are 10 years later, and I think you can say, honestly, you wouldn't have dreamed of getting to this point. Is it still fun? Is it still like something that you are looking forward to every day when you wake up?
Yeah, I think it is still fun. I think sometimes when it comes to our core work, which is the recipes, we get stuck as much as anybody else, and we need like little bursts of inspiration. So we'll go out to eat, we'll travel, and try to kind of get new ideas that way, and be reinvigorated that way. But also like we're getting started on these new projects. We just released a cookbook. So that was a whole thing. I mean, that was like a big step for all of us to write a book together. And it was a roller coaster from start to finish. And it's amazing to see it out there now. And then actually we're also working on a new blogging studio space for cooking and filming and photographing. And we're also working on a new gardening series where we talk about how to grow Chinese vegetables. So we've gotten really, I don't know, I guess my parents basically bought we call it a working mini farm. And so we're using that space for new types of content on the blog, which I think is great because I think farm to table is it's like the same stuff we've been talking about, right? Like these concepts that were applied to food, but not necessarily Chinese food.
Yeah.
And hey, like, let's talk about farm to table from a Chinese food perspective. Let's talk about how to grow these vegetables that may not be necessarily accessible to everybody across, the US or across the world, but you could always like buy a packet of seeds and grow them to have that ingredient.
Yeah.
So that's been a really exciting new chapter, and it's just kind of amazing. Like, I did not imagine 10 years ago that we would be working on the Walks of Life full time, let alone that part of my job would be to like go outside and like be gardening, So
yeah, I mean,
really
there's
cool.
definitely something to be said about like what is rustic and artisanal and beautiful and like of the earth. And when people, there's that like age old, like unfair perception of Chinese food as like, oh, it's greasy, it's cheap, it's not that good, or it's not that good of quality or whatever. But I think like we're finding a lot of like energy out of like having that kind of through line of like the vegetables and like how amazing like the full scope of vegetable use is in Chinese cooking.
And I showed my daughters your posts about your alpacas and a llama. You have alpacas and a llama.
And 2 goats. Don't forget the goats.
And some goats. They were super jealous.
They're very fluffy, but unfortunately they don't like to be pet very much. They're a little skittish.
Ah.
Yeah. They're so soft though.
Now you just ruined it. Let me navigate over to the page real quick. If you go over to everyone out there, go to your nearest web browser and go to thewalksoflife.com, and you'll see at the top so many different categories here. First of all, of course, recipes is first, right? And you have categories, and you have it's like collections is what you call them. You have categories and collections, and you can see things like vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, Chinese takeout, Chinese banquet, holiday season. You have everything on here. It's just 10 years of just accumulating recipes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we have, I think the number is like, it's over 1,000. It might be like 1,100 at this point.
Wow.
Recipes on the site. So there's a lot there. And then we have 100 recipes in our new book.
Well, that's just recipes. That's not even including like ingredients,
and that's just recipes,
and travel, and all the cultural stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what does culinary genealogy mean to you guys? It's at the head of your website here, but what does it mean to you guys?
Yeah, I think it's basically communicating what our blog is, which is a family history as told through food. Because, the recipes that we started with on the blog were the tried and true recipes that we really saw on our dinner table growing up every weeknight. That came from, my dad's mother's table, or my mom's father's like braised fish, or, recipes that have been passed down. And now that we've kind of embarked on this, we've also gathered recipes from other family members, from like my aunts, or from cousins, or, extended family. And like we have this amazing recipe for ham choy, which is like a pickled mustard green that we recorded from my great grandmother. So my dad's grandmother. And our cousin Kathy, she like filmed my great grandmother making it during COVID. She filmed her making it, and she wrote down all the measurements. She watched really closely, and so she helped us record that. So I think, those recipes coupled with this sort of idea of like our food landscape growing up, like now that we've become recipe developers and we kind of know what we're doing now in the kitchen. We've uncovered or demystified secrets of how to make how to make dishes that we never imagined that we would be able to make ourselves at home. But that were dishes that like affected us and that were part of our lives. Whether, you know, dim sum brunches after like Qingming every year, which is actually coming up. It's in 5 days or 6 days. Or, you know, like Chinese New Year banquets and like all those dishes that like meant something to our family at a different point in life or a different time of the year, we've recorded, and it includes non-Chinese recipes too, right? Because you know we are Chinese American,
right?
And so we post recipes that are important to us, regardless of whether they're Chinese or not. So yeah, I think that the blog, the term culinary genealogy really like encompasses all of that. Just sort of one family, our sort of journey through life. In recipe form.
Yeah, amazing. Kaitlin, what's your favorite part of the website other than the recipes?
Other than the recipes? Well, if my dad were here, he'd want me to be like, well, the ingredients glossary, Curtis.
Yeah.
My dad loves the ingredients glossary, as do many people. It is extremely helpful. It's our attempt at cataloging the whole wide world of Chinese ingredients and making it a little bit easier for folks to understand what things are, and then, you know, makes it easier for people to kind of branch out with different kinds of recipes. But that's not my favorite part. I would say my favorite are the travel posts. I think that it's really fun for us to look back on like our family trips from over the years, and we try to make them useful for people because we're like super diligent like itinerary makers, and like, well, I guess me and my sister are mostly, but like, so over the years they've become kind of more like helpful travel guides for different destinations, and it's just really fun to look back on, you know, what you did and what you ate, and there's pictures of us together and stuff like that, and it's just, you know, that's kind of part of the blog that remains more of a true sort of like family journal of sorts and like a family photo album. And like I know my dad likes it too, because he always says, he's like, oh, when I'm like 95 years old, I want to look back and see what we did, you know?
Yeah.
I also love that people use those travel posts like they use our recipes. Like they actually use them to plan their own trips. And I heard from one reader that so Kaitlin and I did like a joint travel post about Maine, like traveling to Maine in fall to like see the fall leaves and stuff. And I recommended this like very obscure kayaking, like bioluminescent kayaking experience in that post. And a reader commented, they were like, oh, we went on that kayaking trip and it was so amazing. And like at the trip, we met another couple who was there because they read your blog. So it was like two people who like went on this really small, like random kayaking thing because they read the Walks of Life, which is just so amazing and cool. And like they met each other and they talked about the blog. And I don't know, I think that the travel part of the blog is just, it's just like the recipes, you know, it's just as rewarding to read that you made a difference in somebody's life or someone, you know, like help them have a good time. So that's really cool.
But yeah, it's kind of like, you know, you guys are like trusted friends now, you know, in a way, you know, we get to know you a little bit through your posts and some of the videos and whatnot. And, you know, I feel like I know you guys a little bit even before we chatted today, you know, and so it's always nice to get recs from someone that you trust and someone that you know. So,
well, the funny thing about like, it's kind of similar to what you were saying though. Like, it's nice in the travel posts when people like share their recommendations too. Like, that's actually my, you know, a great upside of it, because the people come out of the woodworks who like live in that place and they're like, oh, you should have tried you next time try this place, and I love that place too. And the biggest compliment is when the locals say like, oh, you nailed it, like this is what you're supposed to do, and you come to the place that I live, and that's so like awesome for us when we hear that.
That's cool. Yeah, so everyone, go to the Walks of Life website if you haven't already. Go there for sure. There's all kinds of things. There's equipment reviews and advice. I like the kitchen wisdom section, is always cool. Shout out to everyone's favorite Uncle Bill, who gives us advice on ingredients and glossary info. Yeah, just really, really a fun site. Now, I gotta ask, I've tried to do things with my family a little bit here and there, and it usually ends up being someone getting frustrated and someone, you know, being glad that the vacation is over or whatnot. But you guys, not only do you work together a lot and live together sometimes and travel together, you're doing all these things together. Does it ever get to a point where it's like, you know what, maybe it's time for me to do my own thing on my own, or I need a break from this? Like, how does the family dynamic work when you're doing all this work together?
Yeah, I think it's I think that we, like Kaitlin said, when we were growing up, we've always been a close family. We've always, enjoyed like talking to each other and bouncing ideas off each other. And it's great. I mean, I think that like, we are so lucky to be in a situation where all four of us are on board with this and want to do it and feel invested in it. At the same time, working with your family can be frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have the same boundaries that you might have with coworkers,
Sure.
and you know how to push each other's buttons. So there's definitely been, ups and downs over the years. But I think that we've come to a place now that we've been doing this for a decade, that we know how to work harmoniously with each other. And I think that a big part of that is putting in structure that feels like work, like that feels like you're doing a real job and running a real business. So like being organized, like having, workflows that everybody kind of knows, so that, there's no confusion, or you don't have to excessively talk all the time about everything.
Yeah.
And then also just like setting boundaries between family time and work time. So trying not to talk about blog stuff during dinner, for example, which is something that always used to happen, where we would just like find ourselves spending an entire dinner talking about blog things. And now we're just kind of like, let's not talk about that right now.
Right.
We can talk about that later. Like what's going on with you and your life? We kind of try to separate family talk and blog talk.
I will say that part of the value of working together as a family, even though it can be brutal sometimes. Like, it has been really difficult at times, but I think the benefit of sticking with it for so long is that we have this like mechanism in place that kind of like forces us all to come to the table, the literal and figurative table, with sort of this like higher responsibility in mind than just like each one of our like own individual like wants and desires. And like in that way, it is very like, it does feel very much like a Chinese pursuit. It's like we're all kind of like working towards this shared goal, and you have to keep the group in mind, and things start to go off the rails if you don't do that. I think we've done a pretty good job of at least becoming aware of our personal patterns and trying to like break them or overcome them. So yeah, it's really freaking tricky, but it's it's nice that we have this like kind of enjoyable and successful venture that can sort of help us like mediate our interrelational challenges.
Yeah, no, it sure seems great. It sure seems like you're doing something right. Whatever you're doing, keep it up because it's working. Yeah. All right, Sarah and Kaitlin, you have survived our difficult questions. It is time for our lightning round. Are you ready for this?
Love a good lightning round.
Okay. You can answer individually or as a team, up to you. What's a dish that you can eat at least once a week for the rest of your life?
I have one. I would say scrambled eggs with duojiao, which is like a salted chili. It's so good. I swear to God, any time of day, any meal, that dish with rice and like a little veg, like a whatever you have, like sauteed bok choy or whatever, is like my go-to. In fact, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing how much I eat that alone. I'm like, if only people knew that I'm like this like one recipe gal over here most of the time.
I was gonna say the same dish.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so tasty and it's so easy. Like in 3 minutes.
One pan.
Like with like a couple minutes of prep and like 1 minute of cooking, you're like eating. You know?
Yeah, it's a good food. It's eggs are such a perfect food in so many ways. Yeah. All right. Well, that's surprising. Were you surprised that they would be that you guys had the same
I was surprised because I know that that's my favorite, but I guess I've converted Sarah. When I go over to her place for dinner, I'm like, we're making this. And she's like, okay.
All right. All right. Next question. What's a dish that you could probably, with all your recipes and experience, you could probably cook it at home, but what's a dish that you're probably going to order out most of the time instead of cooking it yourself?
For me, that's probably salt and pepper pork chops.
I was going to say the same thing. Look at us right on the street. Oh my God. Our brains are one.
Because that dish is like, I mean, when we were kids, like that was anytime we went to a Cantonese restaurant, that was the one thing we had to order.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so if you've never had salt and pepper pork chops, they're basically a deep fried, very delicious, thinly pounded pork shoulder chop. With a delicious white pepper and salt and fried garlic and a little bit of green chili. And they're so good. And we have a wonderful recipe in our cookbook for it. And my dad nailed it in the book. But I will say that we live close enough to enough Cantonese restaurants that I would rather just kind of go out and order that because for me it's such restaurant food and we've eaten it out at restaurants for so many years.
Oh, I feel like you're like not even giving it enough credit because when you say like, oh, it's a must order, like yes, it was a must order, but like I swear, like it was the highlight of the day. Like if we knew that we were like going out to eat and it's like my mom doesn't even have to ask. She knows to order it. And it's like when it hits the table. And the worst is if it hits the table and you don't have the rice yet. And then you kind of have to like impatiently like decide like, oh, am I going to have a piece without the rice or am I going to wait for the rice? It's just so good. Yummy.
Yeah. Do you guys know if that's more of a Chinese American thing that came over with the gold rush or... Is that something that you've ever seen in like salt and pepper stuff? Have you ever seen that?
You can get it in Hong Kong.
It's a Cantonese dish, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Cantonese thing. So like salt and pepper, not just salt and pepper pork chops, but like salt and pepper squid or salt and pepper seafood. And we actually have
chicken wings.
So salt and pepper in all its forms is like one of our favorite things.
Yeah, important to clarify, it's white pepper for anyone listening who doesn't know.
Right.
But yeah, it's like funnily, I don't think that Cantonese food is so easily replicated, at least in China, that we've seen. Like you can like Szechuan, like Sichuan food is so popular in China. Like it's really like swept. It feels like swept the big cities at least, or you can like always find a pretty good Sichuan restaurant. But like Cantonese is a little bit more. It's a little bit more elusive in terms of like finding a really good spot. And I think here in America, it's just so dominant because of like the immigrant pathways, usually coming out of Guangdong or Hong Kong. So yeah, that's very much like an OG sort of preparation, but just one that's not so it's so in the Chinese American consciousness. I don't know. It's not talked about so much when you kind of go over to China and like you see the food journalism over there. It's like they usually choose to spotlight some different kind of cuisine that's a little bit like more quote unquote like foreign to a Chinese American or a non Chinese American audience.
Yeah, I think it might have been a little case where it came over here with Chinese roots, but then kind of took on its own life, on its own. And then it seems kind of like, to me, for the Cantonese food that I enjoy, it seems kind of like country food. And I think maybe pork chops is kind of one of those dishes that kind of came from the country and then went to America and might have came back to,
Yeah.
it's got
I
some
mean, a
roots
lot
to
of
it.
Chinese food is country food. A lot of it
Yeah,
started in
Yeah.
like kind of a rural and like agrarian context.
sure.
And yeah, you see that in the many regional cuisines of China. I think there are some like 40 distinct regional cuisines across China.
At
Yeah,
least,
so
yeah.
I mean, yeah, there might be something to be said about how it is a more, well, okay, now it's conjecture. I don't know this for sure. Caveat. But like,
Right,
back in the day of those agrarian societies, like oil was so precious. So it's like, and meat too. So it's like you wouldn't really eat meat that often.
Mhm.
You definitely wouldn't deep fry stuff that often. Maybe only for like Chinese New Year. So you're right. It probably is like a little bit
Yeah.
more modern at the very least. I don't know about the like translation across borders, but I think it's probably like the popularity of like the salt and pepper fried treatment is probably, like more of a, relatively speaking, a newer sort of
Yeah.
body of work.
No, this stuff's kind of fascinating. This cultural journey of
It is,
food.
yeah.
Yeah, so you're right you're right in the middle of it. Yeah, that's part of what you do. Yeah. All right, getting away from cooking for a second. Do you have a favorite fictional movie, book, or show about cooking? Can you think of any?
So there's this movie called Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. And the opening
Yeah.
scene of
It's
Eat,
so
Drink, Man,
magical.
Woman is like one of my favorite
good.
like 5 minutes of cinema ever.
Yeah.
The movie is about a dad and his, I think 3 daughters, and the father
Right.
is like a master chef. And the opening scene of the movie is basically this father preparing an extremely elaborate meal for his daughters who are coming home to see him and have dinner. And it's just like, I don't know, just like the upbeat music and all of the techniques that are shown in that.
It's
like,
worth a
very
look up on
short
YouTube
scene.
for anyone listening.
Yeah.
It's
For
so
sure.
good.
Yeah.
It's great.
From the 90s. That was like right after Joy Luck Club, I think that
Yeah.
one came out. And so there's a little bit of a mini Chinese wave in the 90s of things coming over.
So as for me, I'll rep the 90s again, and I'll say I kind of have 2 answers, but I think the first one that comes to mind is like Hey Arnold, the cartoon. It was like a 90s cartoon, and it was about a kid named Arnold. Okay, if anybody doesn't know this, like you're way too young listening, but fine, I'll explain it. It's about this kid Arnold who has a football-shaped head, and he lives in this like sort of undisclosed American city, and it's meant to be like just like a sort of amalgamation of all American cities. And there's an episode where he is in an eating contest. and he like trains for the eating contest with his grandpa, his like kooky grandpa, and he eats all this like weird stuff, like not weird, but like he eats all this like extremely varied stuff, like a herring sandwich and like ice cream and burritos and tacos and souvlaki and like all this stuff, like leading up to the contest and for the contest. And like I feel like you can really tell like that me and Sarah were food obsessed, like literally our whole lives, because like anytime like there was like a little food centric episode of like a cartoon, like a kid's cartoon, we loved that episode. Like it was just so there's just like something about it that's so magical and delightful, and I don't know. Just
to this day we still get excited anytime we watch like animated movies and there's like animated food.
Yeah, like there's just something about it that really adds an extra layer. And it's nice to see food like have its like rightful place in terms of like being shown as an important part of life in like movies and TV. Like my other one that I thought of, which is the movie Moonstruck, which is old, with Cher. Cher and Nicolas Cage, Moonstruck. And it's like an Italian-American story. And I just love the fact that in most of the scenes they're eating or like in the kitchen, or like, you know, kind of like there's a hint of food happening at all times. And that just feels like really like amazingly true to, you know, what like an Italian American family would do, or like any kind of like, I think, ethnic family that thinks food, like considers food to be important and a centerpiece of life and their culture and their heritage. And yeah, I love little touches like that. And it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to say anything about it, but just seeing like the mom in the movie flipping the like eggs and bread and roast peppers in the pan in the morning before she like tells Cher off for like cheating on her fiance with Nicolas Cage. It's just so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the K-drama Let's Eat?
I haven't. So I used to be a big K-drama person, but no, what's it about?
Check it out. I don't even remember the plot, but it's about
just food centric.
Yeah, it's about this woman who loves to eat, and she meets this guy that she can't stand, her neighbor, but he also loves to eat, and then they kind of form a uneasy alliance about eating, and it's a fun watch. You definitely should watch it.
That sounds cute. Yeah, I'll check it out.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple options here, and just for fun, imagine that one of these is something you can continue to eat and love, and the other one is gone from your life for an entire year. All right, you ready for this? Let's go with Sarah first. Noodles or rice? You can pick one, and the other one is gone for you.
Rice, absolutely
rice. Got it. Yeah, rice over noodles.
Yeah, rice over noodles.
Yeah, we're more Cantonese that way.
All day long. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. All right, Kaitlin, how about surf or turf? All seafood or all land animals?
Oh, that's too easy. All turf.
Yeah. If you were on the West Coast, or if you were in New York City more often, yeah, maybe. No, I'm a red meat guy myself. All right, so Sarah, this is a tech one. Imagine that one of these is gone from your life for a year. Which would you rather have eliminated? Any kind of technical issues or internet trolls and haters? One of those is going to be gone from your life for a year.
I'll have to say the technical issues I'd rather have gone. There will always be trolls.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
But to have like a tech issue free year sounds lovely.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I hear you on that one. All right, and we like to end each episode by asking our guests to name an infatuasian. An infatuasian is anyone in the Asian community, living or deceased, that has inspired you. Sarah and Kaitlin, who are your infatuations, or you can pick one together?
I'll go first. I'll say she's actually all the way in China. She's a YouTuber. Her YouTube channel is called Dianxi Xiaoge, and she's in Yunnan. She like cooks and she like serves her grandparents and her family and her village these like amazing dishes. She like goes out she harvests them and she shows you how to preserve them, and I've just gotten really upset. Actually, I know about this channel because a non-Chinese friend recommended it to me, and I was like, oh, like what is this? And now I like tune in every week for like every new video she posts. I just think she's so inspiring, and like I love because like Yunnan food I think is not as known here in the US. And you know, it's a less familiar style of regional cooking. I just find it endlessly fascinating to see all of the wide range of ingredients that she's using, and the visuals. And I think her videos the visuals are really beautiful.
Like ASMR.
Yeah, totally. And her videos are really fun.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, we talked about Lizzie Chi before on our podcast. So another one is just amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's incredible. It's insane what the two of them
making
do.
Her bamboo furniture from scratch. Yeah.
Well, the funniest thing is the Chinese internet trolls trying to be like, she doesn't do all that, and then people will point out like her like bruised fingernails and her like dirty hands, and they're like, no, she's doing it. Like she's definitely actually doing it.
But then she drives home in a Maserati to her mansion. No, I don't. Yeah, no. Just kidding, Lizzie Chi. Don't come at me. Oh man. All right, Kaitlin, you got a infatuation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been thinking about it as Sarah was answering. I think I'm gonna say the most top of mind one, which is Michelle Yeoh.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously she just had like her incredible circuit on like the award season, and so well deserved. And I feel like she's a good example because I feel like over the years, like when I was younger, I was like, whoa, like a Chinese woman, and she's cool. She's freaking badass, and she's like in all these movies and like super successful. But like, over the years and over the course of her career too, it's like, she kind of just became like, unfairly, I think sometimes she's like the be all end all like Chinese actress, right? It's like when they need a Chinese actress, it's like, okay, get Michelle Yeoh on the phone. And I think it was a super nice reminder to like just hear her talk more about like the long arc of her career and her struggle and what she's been through, and kind of a reminder that she still is that icon for so many people, and that like I think even though her journey has been so incredible and yet also like a little bit pigeonholed too in ways that
with the martial arts,
right, like she's always kind of like kept her head up in terms of just trying to push things forward. So she has such a nuanced story. Like I think when you look at it from like a racial lens, that it's not cut and dried. And I think there's a lot of different aspects that you can kind of unpack there. But I just think that she's so. I think she's a great role model and reminder, and like that. A reminder that's not simple, and the path isn't simple, and her journey, even as an extremely successful, like beautiful person, like it was not easy. And then like finally, like only now is she getting like the recognition that she deserves. It's crazy. But I think that's kind of what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, she's amazing. Michelle, and we like to manifest. So if Michelle Yeoh, if you ever want to come on the show, you know how to find us. Send us a message. We'll get you on as soon as possible. All right. Well, I think that does it for our episode. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, this has been awesome, Curtis. Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, I got to give a shout out to my wife. She's the one who messaged you. And she goes, guess who just replied to my message on Instagram? It was you guys. So thanks. You made our day. It was amazing. And for everyone out there, if you have not gone to thewalksoflife.com, please get over there immediately. You can also find them on other social media, Instagram, TikTok. Are you guys on TikTok?
We're paused on TikTok. It's not my medium. I think I've aged out.
Yeah.
Too old.
Oh man. So yeah, you can follow Walks of Life on YouTube or Instagram, and of course their website. And of course you can get their book. We hardly even talked about the book, but my mom has a copy and I haven't been able to wrestle it away from her. So she has the copy at her house. So I got to go get it. But it's a beautiful book. It is, what'd you say, 100 recipes. Are they kind of they're different than the website?
They're designed to some sort of like old favorites are in there, about 20, and then 80 new recipes. And the way that we try to do it is kind of like a good, how do I describe it? A nice diverse set of recipes for anybody that loves Chinese food, kind of no matter what your background is, right? Like different areas of China are represented, Chinese American recipes are represented. So we really wanted to, the title of the book is Recipes to Know and Love from a Chinese American Family. And we really wanted to have that like kind of inclusive spirit with it. So it really is sort of like a really great like how do I say this? A really great like starter pack for anyone who like loves Chinese food and super familiar with certain dishes.
Yeah.
And maybe wants to find something new, and also people who, are maybe a more beginner as well.
Perfect. It's beautiful. And New York Times bestseller. So everyone go out and get the book. Follow the website. Again, thank you so much for coming on. And you guys can, everyone out there can follow us at Infatuasian Podcast. And you can write to us at infatuasianpodcast@gmail.com. And so on behalf of Sarah, Kaitlin, and myself, we hope that you're all happy, healthy, and safe out there until we talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.